All right. I just want to say, everyone, thank you so much. I am beyond thrilled to be in this space, and I just want, if you guys are not familiar or have not met Jennifer, I would just love to. I would be honored to just share a little bit about Jennifer, and I wanted to say that actually today, June 27th, is I've been doing this now for 2 years, this Death Over Tea. So we have been doing Death Over Tea on the 27th of every month at 7 p.m. And 2 years, I can't believe it. And it's really, I created the space out of just selfish reasons. I really just wanted a space for people to just really connect and support one another. And I really wanted to support the unsung heroes because being a personal caregiver myself, and then also kind of navigating my grief and loss was really important. And so, but I always want to remember that when we speak about death and grief and loss, we're always reminded how precious life is and how we can live life fully and just live life fully until we take our last breath. So I'm just going to introduce Jennifer, and I'm just going to let Jennifer just share some beautiful experiences and so Jennifer A. O'Brien has, in her 35 plus years in healthcare, Jennifer has been a practice management consultant to physicians. She served as CEO for two large medical practices and has held administrative leadership positions in three academic medical centers. The art journal she created as a form of self care during her late husband's 22-month illness was published as The Hospice Doctor's Widow and won four awards, including a Nautilus. Now, Jen shares her story, her wisdom, and experience to help people live, love, and serve others more fully by recognizing that at the end of life comes death. Family caregiving is both the hardest job and the greatest honor most of us will ever face, and love is greater than death. I love that part. And her second book, The Care Boss, which I'm just totally geeking out on this book. I love it. It talks about leadership strategies and resources for family caregivers, and it was released in November of 2024. And she's earned her bachelor's degree from Boston University and a master's in the science of organization development from Loyola.
Loyola.
I knew I was going to mess that up. University in Chicago. She has spoken to audiences ranging from sizes 5 to 1,500 and has authored 55 plus articles in professional publications and peer reviewed journals. Jennifer goes between Little Rock, Arkansas, and she is just lavishing in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I just want to say thank you, Jennifer, so much for joining us. I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, Christine. I'm thrilled to be here with you. And it's always so weird to listen to one's bio. Because, I still see a 17-year-old when I look in the mirror, right? Like, wait, who did all that stuff over that many years? Anyway, yeah, it's really a pleasure to be here. And much of what you covered there is 100% on. I guess I'll augment it a little bit by saying um, the journal, the Hospice Doctor's Widow, which was the art journal that I created while my late husband, Bob Lemberg, who was himself a hospice and palliative care physician, while he was sick, I didn't create it to be a book. I just kept an art journal. I'm a self-taught artist. And I really needed an outlet. And I started pretty quickly after he got sick. I don't think I've thought about this a lot. I've been asked this question. I don't think Bob ever knew I was keeping the journal. And I did it for self-care, and I did it I also wanted to document his wisdom, right? Because he was a really good hospice and palliative care physician. And much of what he had done in his professional life, we were now turning on ourselves. And I wanted some of that documented. Of course, it includes days where I thought I was going to murder him, because let's face it, it's not always like this, like it is in the movies. Sometimes sometimes you want to murder them. At least I did. Anyway, and so it just is what happened was, so my career, as Christine mentioned, has been in healthcare. And for the last maybe 20 years of it has been in interim leadership in healthcare. So I met Bob when I was doing an interim CEO position with an orthopedic surgery practice, and fell in love with him, finished up the ortho job, and we had a wonderful life together. And then shortly after Bob died, I took another interim CEO position, this time for a very large multi-specialty medical practice, and a neurologist there, who you talk to people, right, when you're working with them. And one day he told me that he was in the process of diagnosing 3 different patients with ALS. And by this time, I had taken these digital collages that I created, and I had used one of those, those programs you use, you drop your vacation photos in them, and then they send you a book, right? So I used one of those to create a physical journal because everything else, all the files were digital. So by this time I had an actual book. I brought it to this doctor, this neurologist. He took it home. He came back the next day and he's like, "Yeah, Jen, you're not getting your book back. I will be loaning it to these 3 patients, moreover to their spouses, and you need to figure out how to get that thing published because that would really help a lot of people that are facing what you went through." And, I was at the stage in my grief where I was, trying to find meaning. And for me, that was helping other people. So this was just a really compelling idea that my little journal could help some other people that were going through this very difficult thing. So I did. I found a very, very small independent publisher, and they accepted it, and it got published in 2020. And 3 weeks after we had the party, the pandemic shut the whole world down, which was not, you'd think that was a bad thing, but it was a bad thing, of course, in many ways, but it wasn't the worst thing for my situation. I was able to kind of reach out to lots of people in the space because instead of being on the TED stage, they were stuck at home, and I, tracked them down. And so I was able to, make my way into the space and start to learn about end of life and caregiving advocacy. And that was really, really great. Having worked in medicine for 37 years now, in other specialties, I can tell you there are a lot of jerks in the other specialties. There are very few, if any, jerks in the end of life space, right? And that, I love that. I love that. Let's face it, the jerks kind of self-select out to orthopedic surgery or neurosurgery. And it's really the beautiful, beautiful, loving, caring people that you find in the end of life space. And so I'm happy to be here. And then so what kind of dealt with that book and did my best. And then just to transition into Care Boss, which is the second book, which I think we're going to spend most of our time on tonight. So I got into this, following all these people and on social media and just sorting through who's who. There was a young woman named Lucinda Koza. She is still named Lucinda Koza. I didn't mean to speak about her in the past tense, but what she was doing then was she was taking care of her dad, and she had amassed a following of about 100,000 millennial and Gen Z caregivers. Now, sadly, not sadly necessarily for her, but sadly for these 100,000, she's not doing this anymore, because she had twins, and now she talks about twins a lot. But so kind of sad for those 100,000 millennial and Gen Z caregivers. God only knows what's happened to them. But one of the days, during this whole thing, she posted, "Remember, you are the CEO of the situation." And I was like, wow, that's spot on, right? Like the family caregiver is in charge, whether it's overt or covert, you are leading this situation. And then I started to think about her followers, and I'm thinking, not very many millennials or Gen Zs, and in that, I can even expand that into caregivers in general, have been a CEO. And I have done both, and I've done both several times. I took care of my mother when she was dying of cancer. I took care of my husband, and then most recently, I took care of my dad. He died of congestive heart failure 3 years ago next month. Um, and I was his long distance caregiver. So I've done the CEO because it's interim, right? I'm not a lifer. I do these interim positions that last 2 to 4 years. Done the CEO position several times, and I've done the family caregiver. And yeah, there's some serious parallels. And so I started writing this book to try to take everything I could share. And I'm lucky enough that I was a leader in healthcare. So there's a lot that's really specific to family caregiving because I've worked in healthcare. It wasn't a widget factory or anything like that. So anyway, I put together a book. I put a lot of it is I think it's a relatively quick read. I did not want to weigh it down because having been a caregiver, I know that a big chapter book is overwhelming. I think it was overwhelming for me when I was a caregiver. So it's got, 7 sections. Within them, there are quick subsections. Some of them are a page long and not more. There's some graphics in there to just keep things moving. And so yeah, so that's how Care Boss came about. And I'm gonna like stop talking now because it because it feels like I should let Christine do some talking or something.
Oh my gosh, no, I'm like in, I'm all in, I'm all in. And I love I mean I love everything about what you said about the Care Boss book because before you all hopped on, I was talking with Jennifer and I'm just like, I mean you could see my book. It's like all well, you can't see it, but there's all these sticky notes and I'm just like, yes, yes, yes. And I was sharing with Jennifer before you all hopped on that like I was in tears and then I realized like during my caregiving journey with my loved ones like there are some things I did not do well a lot of the time and but I was reminded like I would be on my knees in the bathroom in the hospital and just falling apart and then I would get back up and I'd go back out there and and operating on little sleep and losing my person and all of that so hard and but what it reminded me of is that I did some things right and so as I navigate current situation and just looking ahead for caring for other people in my life it's like now I have the tools and I love there's all these little quick things about planning asking for help the mantras there's so many gems in the book that I think are really helpful for people and I think probably the biggest thing that I got out of the book was the sense of empowerment like the CEO you said CEO, when I think of a CEO, I'm like, that's the boss, right? And then I'm like, wait a minute, I'm the boss. And your CEO stands for Chief Everything Officer, which is so true, right? I mean, you're the chief of everything. And I have a very dear friend of mine who's going through, a challenging situation as a caregiver. They're just starting their journey. They've already had one health thing going on, and now they have another journey that they're navigating. And she talked to me about she has this name for this other person in charge, and I didn't realize that I have the same thing. I call it my alter ego, but it's that person who is like emboldened to tell the providers what my parents' wishes were. Her name is Crystal, by the way. So if Crystal comes out, sometimes she's kind of bossy. But I think that, I think it's just that sense of empowerment is what I really received. It was just such a gift in that book. I was wondering, can I read a little bit because I love what you shared about your husband Bob, and really when I think about the experiences that I've had with hospice doctors, like they're a different breed. Like they're just different. And palliative care, I love them all, and I think that just reading his words. I was introduced to you about 2 years ago when I stumbled across your Peace Toolkit, and I've given it to clients, which is an amazing resource. But this is what really hit me. So if you guys will just allow me to read this, this is in her book uh, called Precious Time. And so it says the term was coined by my late husband Bob Limberg, MD, a palliative care physician, who would tell patients and families, "You are into precious time," to help them understand that death was nearing. Precious time doesn't so much mean that time is precious, although it certainly is. Instead, precious time, with emphasis on that first word, is a type of time. Precious time is when death is imminent. Precious time is when you lean in further and make your love and care known, because this person will soon die, and then you will go on living. There is no dress rehearsal for the death of your care recipient. When you enter precious time with your care recipient, the vision starts to be realized. You will not get a do over. This may be one of the biggest events of your life. You will carry it and how you managed it for the rest of your life. There's something very profound about that, the precious time. And I think I'm just so grateful for that reminder. Like every day is a gift. Every day is a gift. And so, what a gift for you to have that beautiful gift from him. So, I just
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
thank you.
No, that thank you for selecting that as something to share with the group. Yeah, I mean, we talked at the dinner table every night about patients and his day, and he would say, I told the family they were into precious time, and and they knew what he meant. It was, I think it's hard even for the most seasoned end of life uh professionals to say your person's dying, and and of course we were in Little Rock, Arkansas, which is where I lived with him. So the South, and that's even a tougher place to use straightforward. We don't use straightforward language in the South. And so this way of saying it just really resonated with people. They knew, they understood what he meant. I know this for a fact because he more than once got a thank you note from the family, who were grateful, obviously, for the care, but were also explicitly grateful that someone finally told them in the healthcare system, your person's dying, this isn't going to go on forever. And I think for those of you who are also caregivers or who have been caregivers, the average duration of family caregiving is 4.5 years. That's the average. It's a long time, right? And so that means for some it goes on for even, a decade or so. And in that, what I call life-sustaining caregiver role, which you might be in for years, you are focused on things like getting him a good meal and did he get a good night's sleep, and everything from what's his blood sugar to what's his pulse ox. It's a whole range of stuff that you focus on in life sustaining family caregiving. And when your care recipient transitions to hospice or starts into precious time, that's probably, I think there are two incredibly difficult transitions that the family caregiver goes through. The first is transitioning from that life-sustaining family caregiver to end-of-life family caregiver. And when no one is willing to say, you're into precious time, your person is, whatever the language, is, no one is willing to say that to a family caregiver who has been spending years, every single day, making sure that, he got enough to eat and he get whatever, all the stuff. Because as an end of life caregiver, then yeah, of course he's going to start to sleep more and he's going to start to eat less and he's going to and this is perfectly natural as the dying process starts. But for the family caregiver who's been focused on food and beverage and, sleeping and waking and all that sort of stuff for years, that's an incredibly difficult transition to make, especially when no one tells you. Um, and and then of course getting used to, okay, leaning into, I just need to be with him so that after he takes his last breath or she takes her last breath, that I know I will have been present. Lots of family caregivers. The second, I think, hard transition that a family caregiver goes through is, from caregiver to griever. And I think a lot of people who have made that transition from caregiver to griever have some regret about that precious time, not realizing they were into precious time, and therefore kind of getting focused on he's sleeping too much or he's not alert. Yeah, there comes a time when he's going to be less and less alert, and you still need to lean in and hold his hand or whatever your language is to your person, and tell him all the things, you love him, and you're going to be okay, and you forgive him, or all the stuff. So, and it's, we, because Bob had coined that term precious time, the minute we got the diagnosis, as far as I was concerned, we were into precious time. Now, I don't think Bob ever introduced the notion of precious time to a patient's family 22 months out. That was just, right? That was just because I knew the term and I knew what we were in for. And so, in a way, I think it helped me a lot because I made the decision, you know, I don't know how long this is going to go on, but I am not going to get to the other end of this and have regrets about my behavior in this, right? So I became a much nicer person than I am dur- during that period. Yeah, much nicer. Yeah. Anyway, so yes, I'm glad you brought up the precious time. I think it's so important. And I don't know if we want to talk about this now, but I'll just introduce it. If you don't want to talk about it now, we'll do it as a teaser, that I do have on my website, on the resources page of my website. And my website is jenniferaobrien.com. I have a number of free downloads. But one in particular is called the Precious Time Implementation Guide. It's designed for professionals, mainly I had it in mind for healthcare professionals, but I think it's perfectly appropriate for doulas, for any kind of professional working in the space. I wrote it for professionals in all of healthcare because we have a real problem in healthcare. Outside of the subspecialty of hospice and palliative care, we have a real problem with healthcare not recognizing that at the end of life comes death. Period. They don't they continue to position death as the enemy. And if you do that, you're going to lose to your enemy with every single patient. So it was, meant to introduce the term because it has been really, really useful. In fact, Precious Time was in the first book, and it really kind of blew up, especially among the professionals who read the book, larger than the book itself. And so when I realized that, Barbara Carnes, I don't know if you're familiar with Barbara, but she's like the maven of hospice. She wrote a blog about precious time. What is it? The Good Death asked me to write about precious time. So it really got quite large, and so I put this download together as here's what it really means, and here's how you use it. And there are some case studies in there about how it's the term has been very successfully used. And then, of course, there's a case study in there about it not being used, and that wasn't very successful. So it's a good download. I recommend, honestly, I gotta tell you, I'm pretty proud of all of my downloads. There's 7 of them at this point. I'm working on an 8th that'll be, I think, a really great one. But yeah, and they're all free, so please, by all means. And of course, when you sign up for one of these free downloads, I will get your email address. I send out a monthly-ish, not every month because I can't get my act together, newsletter that is very short. It is always 750 words or less because I cannot stand these long newsletters that I don't know who has the time to read all that stuff. But anyway, I send this thing out. If you don't want to get my newsletter, you just unsubscribe. It is not going to hurt my feelings. You just unsubscribe and we're all good. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me at all. So anyway, I think all the downloads, but that one that ties specifically into precious time. Yeah, I thought we should talk about that a little bit.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you're kind of stealing my thunder, Jennifer. That was what I was going to talk about because it's so good. I must have subscribed to everything on your website last night. So if you're overwhelmed by all of my requests to join to get it all, I got it all. And so I just wanted to read to you because for being a healthcare provider, this hit home because being in I was an oncology nurse at 22 and it was right in the middle of the AIDS epidemic. And, I saw a lot of I had hard lessons
Yeah.
and seeing people die every day on that unit and families being completely surprised by that. And so I'm just going to read you guys this case study of just in this precious time, handout, this great resource because it is phenomenal and it blew me away. Yeah, go
Well,
ahead.
let me just, before you read that,
Yeah.
let me just say that it was both. So what I didn't tell you was I lost my only sibling when I was 18. He was 13. He died 3 weeks post motor vehicle accident. He was my parents had to make the decision to extubate him. And then my mother died of pancreatic cancer about not quite 20 years after my brother David died. So I had a lot of personal experience with losing people very close to me. And of course, Bob had all this professional experience. And both of us agreed that as hard as it is to tell someone your person is dying, it is so much better to do that. And so they know, or maybe they deny it. You know what I mean? Maybe they go into deep denial and that's okay too. That's their deal. But that it is far more troubling to be with someone after they've lost a loved one, especially from illness, and they say, but I thought we had more time. And you're just like, oh my gosh, why didn't someone speak up? Someone who had objectivity, who could tell you that time was drawing short. So that's part of what's in this download is why this is important, and then these case studies, and you're welcome to read a case study if you want to. But I just wanted to kind of lay that groundwork that as hard as it is to do it, to tell someone, it's so much better than I didn't know it was coming.
And I think even as a hospice nurse, when I was hospice nursing, those are hard conversations to have. They're a hard conversation to receive. But I think for me, it has only helped to empower me to just tell the truth. The people that are dying deserve to know the truth, and then the people and their loved ones deserve that because I think that really um, is an unfair thing for everyone to not be prepared. And then you miss all those last I love yous and goodbyes, and
Right.
there's all these
Yeah.
things that all these
Yeah.
things. It's just and
Yeah.
then does that really help us for healing? If we can
Yeah.
be
Bob
prepared.
would always say, the patient's going to be fine.
Yeah.
right? He'd say, I've seen death thousands of times. The patient is going to be fine. It's the family I worry about. And I think he had something there.
Yeah, very much, very much. So I'll just read this case study because I know that there's a couple of medical people that just might want to hear this about how maybe we can be prepared and maybe think about this differently. So the case study says a woman in her late 40s had been living with stage 4 metastatic cancer for years, and her husband was her primary caregiver. The oncologist recommended that she have her port replaced, and since the first port had lasted about 5 years, which is standard, the patient and her husband took the recommendation for a new port as an indication that she may have have as much as 5 years to live. They felt encouraged, and she had to be admitted to the hospital for the procedure, and her condition deteriorated rapidly. And the husband felt that no one was telling them what was really going on. And at some point in her hospital stay, her husband noticed a white dove magnet had been placed on the outside metal door frame of her hospital room. He saw it, but did not have a chance to learn the reason or meaning behind it. And then his wife died during that hospital stay. And not too long after that death, her husband learned from a hospital employee that that magnet on the doorframe was a message to all the nurses, aides, and all other professionals that this patient was dying, but did not tell the but not to tell the family, which surprises me. While she and her husband knew her diagnosis was terminal, his grief had been compounded because he thought they'd still have time, and now knows that the professionals knew that she was dying, and he did not tell him. And that just broke my heart when I read that. Just broke my heart when I read that. I think that, I think for uh, I wanted to maybe ask you a question, if you don't mind, Jennifer, about what about the person who is like in the middle of caregiving right now? Like what would you like I haven't read your book yet, but there's all these like strategies and resources that are available. And if someone was just going through their caregiving journey right now and it's really super hard, what advice would you give them?
Oh, yeah, there's that old Winston Churchill, if you're going through hell, keep going. Um, I think I would try to, I think the first thing I would do is listen, because that's the most important thing, and validate, right, everything they're thinking and feeling, because there's no way they're thinking and feeling anything that's not perfectly normal given how hard that job is. Um, I had several times when I was taking care of Bob. I mean, he had been a surgeon before he was palliative care. He had been a plastic and reconstructive surgeon, so he had a certain personality, that he was kind of professionally raised with. And when he felt bad, he'd done a lot of work on himself long before I met him. Thank goodness, because I'm going to tell you what, I wouldn't have been attracted to an egotistical surgeon. I worked with plenty of those in my career. But he'd done a lot of work on himself. But when he was feeling bad, physically or emotionally, he lashed out at me a number of times during the family caregiving, you know, period. He lashed out at me. He said ugly things to me. He got, into the fetal position in the middle of the night. And then, where I thought, oh my God, this man, is he going to be okay? And then he had an oncology appointment at 10 a.m. and that man got in the shower and he put on a tie and a coat and he walked into that place like he owned it. And I was just like, oh my God, like, right? I mean, how are you doing this? And of course, the oncologist never asked me, how's it really going? Um, so anyway, so yes, there was a lot, almost, I say this without any real experience. So perhaps, well, a little bit of experience. I was raised by an angry alcoholic Irishman. So almost a battered wife syndrome thing, right? Where I couldn't say what was really going on because my husband would have been pissed at me. And I was determined to make these last couple of, whatever we had left, like I said, nicer person than I normally am, more subservient probably than is my inclination. So yeah, so there was this this at the same time, there was this incredible intimacy to the whole thing and goodness. There were far more times that Bob cried about how, and we cried about how we would miss each other and how he finally felt happy in his life and now this was happening and stuff like that. So, there's of course Care Boss is an entire book of guidance for a caregiver. And I think like I said, I would listen and of course ask, do you want to be heard or do you want help? Because sometimes people just want to be heard. Um, and then if the answer was help, um, then listening to what they said and what they were having the hardest time with, and see if I could draw on something that would be helpful to them. There are the sections in the book are strategy and planning, team and resources, data and analysis, facility supplies, and what we call in healthcare environmental services, which is really housekeeping between you and me. And then the second to last section is a section called self-management. So it's all about like, not really self-care, but managing yourself and your feelings and your stuff as you go through this. And then the final section is on what I call beginning to realize the vision. And that's about that transition from life-sustaining family caregiver to end-of-life family caregiver. It's the, kind of the section that lands you in the precious time. And so I guess I would I feel like each of those sections, well, like I said, it's a quick read. Each of those sections is pretty solidly packed with some very practical. Someone reviewed it and called it jarringly practical. Not sure how I feel about that, but it is totally practical. There's a lot of practical stuff in there. So yeah, I think I would try to listen and see what might benefit that person the most. I'm noticing there's something in the chat here.
There are a couple questions here, so let's go into the chat.
Yeah.
Heather, how do you get the medical staff to tell the truth and not beat around the bush? I want to know what is exactly going on so that I can be prepared and prepare my loved ones. Hmm.
Um, So, I mean, one of the reasons created that free download is so that medical staff would have some understanding of how to use the term. Um, I think you have to keep in mind that a lot of times we want more definitive answers than even the professionals can give us. That's a natural tendency, right? The human gestation is 40 weeks. We know from the point of conception, we know about how this is going to go. And yeah, there might be some surprises in the labor and delivery room, but for the most part, right, we know when it's going to happen and within certain parameters, how it's going to happen and that sort of thing. And I think we start to think about the same thing. We long for the same level of detail and schedule with end of life, and it just doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. And I would say in certain specialties within healthcare, as the family caregiver, you're kind of better off doing some of your own research. And I don't mean, I mean reputable places like reputable hospice, Barbara Carnes, reputable hospice doula that sort of resources because, we know from Barbara Carnes and other resources that a few months prior to death, the person starts to usually retreat socially. They don't want to see as many people. They get a lot quieter. And I just think with a lot of specialties, because we are so bad in healthcare about recognizing that at the end of life comes death, that you're kind of better off making those observations yourself. I mean, I've always said the family caregiver is the just absolute untapped asset to the professional caregiver. Like, we're with this person, 24/7 sometimes. I mean, at the end of their life, certainly. And we have a much better handle on who they are and when they're starting to shift. So I don't have a great answer for you on that, and how to get medical staff to do that, because I will also tell you, as someone who has worked in healthcare for 37 years, I know how that white dove thing happened. I have worked with physicians for nearly 4 decades. I know how they work. Here's what happened. Somewhere along the line on that oncology unit, um, someone said to a nurse, because it's easier to talk to nurses than to doctors a lot of times, and they said, "What do you think?" And the nurse said, "I think you're getting close," or something like this, right? Like the nurse divulged that it's coming, it's getting close. And an oncologist got furious. That's what happened. And an oncologist threw a temper tantrum because you have no business telling my patient that they're dying. Because this happens. I mean, it happens in every other specialty. And so all of a sudden, we created this workaround where we're going to put a magnet on the door so that nobody ever talks to these patients. This is Dr. Live Forever's patient, and nobody is to discuss with this patient what's happening because we did that once and there was hell to pay. I think as someone who has been in the field for a long time, I think it's a really good hypothesis as to how that whole thing started. And so that's another difficulty, is that the person in charge in every other, in hospice and palliative care, it's an interdisciplinary team, as I'm sure you all know. And in that specialty, I mean, I'm telling you, the chaplain has as loud a voice as the MD on the team. That does not exist in any other specialty in all of healthcare. It just doesn't happen. There is a distinct hierarchy. There may be an interdisciplinary team, but the MD or DO is always in charge, and they say how it goes. So that's the trouble with a lot of medical staff. Some of them may want to tell you what they really think, but they know they might get in trouble if they do. So I go back to I know I've been talking for a long time here, but I go back to this. You have a better idea. Your gut is telling you some stuff. Your observations are telling you some stuff, and you're not going to be able to nail it down, but you will see it probably quicker on your own than anybody's going to be able to tell you. I mean, hospice will be able to tell you, weeks to months, right? Days to weeks, that kind of stuff. And you'll need to go with that. You're not going to be able probably to nail it to the minute. Although I will tell you, when you really, in my case anyway, when you really listen to your intuition, like Bob died on the 19th of January, 2017. So he was getting, the hospice doctor himself was incredibly reluctant and found it very difficult to admit himself to hospice status. This is another big problem in the field, which we can go into if you want to. But he did not admit himself to hospice status until I think it was about 10 days before he died. Like, that's too late as far as I'm concerned. And I knew it, right? I knew I was trying to get him to see it, but I also wanted to give him the end of life that he wanted, and he wasn't seeing it. And I'm not going to tell this man who has been caring for patients at that time, he has been the doctor for 40 years. I'm not going to tell him when to admit himself to hospice. I mean, I hinted at it, but that was the best I could do. So anyway, I would say it was probably first or second week in December. I'm lying in bed one night and I think he was already asleep and I'm crying and I'm thinking, he's going to die on Christmas. You know what? He's going to ruin, like, this is how things go for me. Like, totally selfish, of course, but I'm like, he's going to die on Christmas, damn it. And then I woke up the next morning and of course I was tired and weepy and all that sort of stuff. And I woke up the next day and I'm like, you know what? He's not going to do that to me. He's going to get to mid-January. And sure enough, January 19th. So, I think we work with our brain and our gut and then we also have to go with it, you know, and we've been doing that for a while if you've been a caregiver. So, yeah. Okay. So we have a couple of other questions. Christine, do we want to going back? Might help.
So the question is going back to how you might help or what you might say to a grieving person who didn't know that there was precious time from your heart. What would you say?
Yeah. Again, I would listen and validate, because it doesn't do any good. There are people whose loved ones get admitted to hospice and they still don't know their person's dying. And I don't think that's just denial. Like, I think that's also some just not fully understanding what hospice is. And I have to say, I think there are hospice professionals who don't pick up on that, and realize, oh my gosh, the wife or the mother or whoever it is, she doesn't realize what hospice really means. And they go, well, of course she knows he's on hospice, and they don't necessarily say that, but they think that. And that's just unfortunate. So I certainly wouldn't, my initial, like, I wouldn't do anything like, well, what did you think was going to happen? Kind of, or not that you would ever say that, but I mean, I wouldn't even lean toward that. I would just, like I say, I think listening and not giving up on the griever, whatever the situation for that griever is. I can tell you, I have lost every member of my immediate family, including my husband, and I have been the griever. I have been in the receiving line many, many times, and the folks who maybe not, some folks that are there right away, it's great. A lot of folks that stick around a month and 2 months and then text me, and just say, I'm just thinking about you, because it's a lonely place. Everybody sort of scatters after a few weeks. And so I think being present, I always tell people, I'm going to text you periodically. Please do not feel like you have to respond, but know that if you do, I'll be delighted. I'll be delighted. I'm not going to forget about you, and I'm not going to give up on you. I also am a big fan, and I know I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here because your question was very specific, but I don't know if you're familiar with help texts. So help texts is a system, like, it's a beautiful combination of grief support and technology, and the subscription is $99 for a year. And I have a coupon code that's on my website, but you can also take it down. My coupon code is Memento Mori, and that gives you a 10% discount, which takes it down to $89, which to me, like, is way better than a bouquet of flowers, because So you get a subscription to Help Test for the griever. They get an email, they put in, their person's name and how long, some specifics, how they died, that kind of stuff. And then for 1 year, I think it's twice, 3 times a week, the griever will get a text that is so perfectly constructed. I cannot even tell you how they do this. I like they combine their understanding of grief with the specifics of this person's situation. And I've given it now to several people who are grievers, and I get great feedback. Jen, I feel like I'm getting a hug, every time I get one of these texts. So I'm not trying to sell you anything, but I do think this is an incredible resource. And they also do a year subscription for family caregivers. Same sort of thing. You put in the name of the person you're caring for and what they have. And I've actually done that one for a month just to experience it. And I mean, the texts were perfect. They were just perfect. So anyway, I hope that helps. His sitter CNA had no idea. Yeah. So one of the comments is, when my son was in hospice, his sitter, who was a CNA, had no idea why he was not hooked up to an IV. Yes, the understanding in healthcare of end of life is nothing short of pathetic. It really is. I just can't even tell you. Another question is, which of your books should I read first? I work in hospice. I Okay, so just full disclosure, The Hospice Doctor's Widow is a hardback, and it'll always be a hardback. It's an art journal, so it's in color. All of this is to tell you it's $39.95. Which I recognize is not inexpensive. And so but as someone who works in hospice, I kind of start with The Hospice Doctor's Widow, just because Bob's still alive in that book, and he was the hospice professional. But Care Boss is also, I think, totally worth your time. And I don't know how much it's I think it's $16.95. Why does it? I don't know. I don't. I'm sure. No, it's $19.95. Sorry. Yeah. So anyway, half the price. I just am aware that we all don't have gazillions of dollars to spend on books, sadly. Yeah. What else? Are we missing anything? Somebody is.
I think that, I think the that I wanted to just mention also that your the resources that you have on your website are incredible. And, I think one of the things too that was really important for me to read, because I think sometimes when I'm helping, I think I'm helping, I'm really just walking beside someone in their process of caregiving, is
Which is
that
helping.
yeah, sometimes it's just like I don't even know what to say or do. And so, but when you're in the middle of caregiving or when you're in the middle of grieving, like it's like this disease of isolation. Nobody knows what to say or do, so they don't do anything or say anything, and you're completely isolated and alone. And nobody will fully be able to understand what that caregiving role is until you actually go through it. I don't know what it's like to lose a spouse. I have lost other family members, but at the same time, I keep trying, I just keep trying. And I think that just really reminding myself is that, there's this part in your book I loved about care shaming, right? It's like, oh, you should do this, go get a massage. Don't you have time? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's such a great reminder. And I said that, self-care 101, and who am I to say that? We have no idea what people are going through. And so that whole idea of care shaming, I used as a nurse, people would say, this one nurse would go and she would go get a massage. I gotta go, I got a massage. And I shamefully said, oh, well, aren't you, lucky? And she needed those massages in order for her to continue working. I had no idea, the benefits of a massage because I had never had one before. But we're, for me anyway, I I'm uncomfortable with be uncomfortable, and I fumble a lot, and I say things that, I misspeak all the time, but I'm learning, and I just really appreciate the effort of just like just stay here with me. This is really hard, and I think that's all we can do for one another.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. If you're a healthcare professional, I think there are a couple of free downloads that are totally worth your time. The Precious Time Implementation Guide is certainly one of them. The other one that I highly recommend is, well, there's two, is I wrote a position, and this one is in CareBoss. There are a couple of the free downloads are in CareBoss. So if you want to try to get a couple of things, anyway, if you start with, so backing up, sorry. As a healthcare professional, I think you would really benefit from downloading and reading the family caregiver position description. So long before CareBoss was even an idea, I started to think about the family caregiver role, and as a leader, what if I had to hire for this position? Like what would it, what would the position description look like? And I wrote one, and I vetted it. I had a physician who's also caregiver for her adult son who's a quadriplegic. I had her look at it. I had a couple of other people who have dual, professional and personal family caregiver roles, vet it, and I'm very pleased with, I think it's accurate. But I totally think it's worth a read for a professional healthcare person, because you will be astounded. Your first reaction to a couple of the responsibilities will be, no way. Family caregivers don't do that. Because I've had nurses tell me that when they read it for the first time. No, 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 no. Family caregivers don't give intramuscular injections. Oh, yes, they do. Right? Like I mean, that one I knew because I'd done it myself. There's just, that is totally worth a read, to help you see, and to help you see what an asset you have in the family caregiver, right? When you're in your nurse role, or your whatever role you're in your professional caregiving. Um, and then I'll come back to your question, Karen. I also think the At Peace Toolkit is a totally worthwhile download. I think one of the things that that is missing in healthcare in general, if it were up to me, every single medical school, nursing school, allied health program would do advanced healthcare directives for each and every student as part of orientation, period, QED, full stop. I cannot understand why this is not a part of orientation. It's astounding to me. If you look at healthcare in general, there is no different. Like we read the Conversations Project statistics that 93% of us think it's important to talk about our end of life wishes with our loved ones. And yet I think we're up to 33% now have actually done it. Okay. Healthcare is no different. And yet it should be. This is the one thing that every single patient, right? This is the one medical event that every single patient goes through, and yet there is nothing covered in medical school on it. And so anyway, I'm going to try to wrap up the preaching here. So the At Peace Toolkit is the guide to being at peace with your own end of life, with your loved one's end of life. I have a wonderful story that will be coming out in the fall, but I'll give you a little sneak preview of a group of 15 women friends in California who took the At Peace Toolkit and met every Monday night, and each and every one of them got their end of life plan or preparation done, not only for themselves, but for their adult, they got advanced directives done for their adult children, 18-year-old children. By the way, that's Mama Bear Legal Services is what you want to check out there. They will do an advanced directive for your college age kid for $79. Anyway, these 15 women did it. And the person who got the least, who admitted she felt like didn't get it all done, was at 85%. And many of them were starting on it with their parents. So my next free download is going to be a companion piece to the At Peace Toolkit if you want to get a group together and do it as a group, because I think that was brilliant, right? It's like working out with your friend. You're not, you know, you're going to run in the morning by yourself. There's a chance you might not do it, but you got to meet a friend to run in the park with right? You're going to show up. So anyway, I think am I going over time? To answer the question, is it okay to make a copy of the download? You know, I would rather that you have them sign up for the download and get it themselves. I really, I work very, very hard on these downloads. And all I'm getting out of it is an email. And like I said, if they unsubscribe, that's fine. But it helps me to understand what kind of impact these downloads are making, to know that someone actually, went through the opt-in of downloading it. So I would prefer, I mean, obviously there's not going to be the download police. They're not going to show up at your house, but I would prefer if you would have them go ahead and opt in with their own email address, even if they unsubscribe right afterward.
Oh my gosh, this was so good. I want to honor your time, Jennifer. I could listen to you all day. And I feel like I hope it doesn't seem like I was really creeping on you, but I really have just done a, deep dive into your website because there is so much there. The
Oh my
free
gosh, no,
resources, there's
not
tons. I
creepy.
signed up
Like,
for
I
everything.
love it. And listen, I am putting a ton of work into this. So the
Yeah,
notion that someone is out there reading it is like thrilling, thrilling for
good,
me. Yes.
good.
You can stalk me anytime, Christine.
I just want to say thank you so much. I feel so honored that you just could just be here with us. And I put in the chat the Mama Bear legal forms link that you mentioned. Thank you for that. We will definitely check that out. And then I also put your website in there for anyone that wants to check that out. I've listened to you on podcasts, and I just want to say thank you for telling the truth, because I think that it's really hard to have these conversations, but I just really appreciate you telling the truth. And then you have a quote, and now of course my brain is stopping, that love is greater than
Love is
death.
greater than death.
Yeah.
And listen, I don't know how long, I can't remember how long y'all usually go. So I'm not meaning to cut, I can talk about it for hours. But what occurred to me in the love is greater than death is, and this relates again to healthcare. I did this series, this little video that I put out on social media that had stuff like, okay, so death is greater than a healthy lifestyle, right? For all those kale eating folks out there, and I like kale. I'm sort of one of them. It's great, but you're still going to die at the end of your life, right? Death is greater than remission. Death is greater than a cure. Um, um, but only love is greater than death. It's just a fact. I mean, you can, yeah, and my little video goes through a whole bunch of, death is greater than everything, but love is greater than death. Love is always greater than death. And I think that's super important. And it's one of the additional after law. In fact, it's the new last page of the Hospice Doctor's Widow, of just kind of sorting through, what are the equations here? What are the relationships? And love is greater than death is my kind of mantra these days. And it explains, why we grieve. People die, but you don't stop loving them when they die, right? Like, I just, I don't, I'm not, I don't understand people who say things like, when are you going to get over it? Never getting over Bob Lemberg. And I don't want to. I'm still crazy about that man, you know?
Love that.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
So yes, love is greater than death. I actually have some stickers and buttons and things that I have a t-shirt. Love is greater
Oh,
than death.
you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are those for sale? I would love to get one of
You know,
those.
what I usually, unfortunately, since we're not in person, I can't just pull out my sticker book and when I go to meetings, I usually bring this thing full of all these stickers I've designed and offer to people to take what they want, but we're in a virtual meeting, so that won't be happening.
Uh, oh my gosh. I could talk with you all night long. I can't thank you enough, Jennifer. Oh my gosh. Did you guys have any other last minute questions while I'm holding Jennifer hostage? Do you guys have anything else that we have? Does anyone else have any other questions? Maggie said you're spot on. And a couple people popped off, but Karen Midlow says we owe it to our patients and families to be truth tellers. We absolutely must. I think that that is our, we have to. We have to. Oh my gosh. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Jennifer, I just can't thank you enough. This has been amazing and
My
I
pleasure.
so grateful, so grateful. And I again your website, I will post it one more time in the chat and yeah, have an amazing time in New Mexico and
Yep.
forward to all of these new things that you're sharing with us. Look forward to continued conversations.
And I would like to say to all of you, keep going. This is
Thank you.
important work that you're doing, even if you may not get the kudos and the positive feedback, give them to yourself. Keep going. This is very important work we are doing. Very important. Yeah, we are the unsung heroes. We are holding up society.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, you guys, we are finishing. I know our East Coasters, I'm going to say goodnight to you because I know it's very late there. Sending love to you all. Jennifer, I can't thank you enough. I appreciate that so much. I appreciate it. Everybody, have a good night. Thank you so much. Bye.